The Imitation Nation podcast covers all things counterfeit, hosted by Shabir Imber-Safdar of the Partnership for Safe Medicines and Sven Bergman of Venture Global. All statements are their own and not the opinions of their employers. All right, welcome to Imitation Nation number 16, the first Imitation Nation episode you will listen to after the end of de minimis.
That's a nice opener. Hey, Shabir, how are you? Well, it will be the end of de minimis for now. No, I know there's just so much changes, but I agree with you. I think it's dead for good. We'll talk about it, but what a development. Anyways, how are you?
I'm good. I'm getting over COVID, which I will talk about later maybe, but we're recording this on August 26th, and de minimis is supposed to end at 12:01 a.m. on August 29th. I guess roughly 2.5 days since it's about noon here. And I think we have to talk about it because de minimis at 1.3 billion packages a year coming into the U.S. is a massive part of the global supply chain that actually consumers will notice. And I've been seeing it. I'll tell you some of the different ways. First of all, I saw a study from a Yale economist that the de minimis tax exemption is likely in additional duties to cost the average family about $136 per year. Yeah. And I find that a little hard to believe. I think that's low because, as you know from looking at some of the new rules in the executive order, minimum de minimis tariff is $80. Even if you're from the friendliest country that is not annoyed the America, you're getting an $80 tariff on a de minimis package, maximum of $200. And so that's an issue. And I think it could, that's basically 2 packages like that is more than $136 per year. And Americans order a lot of small packages from foreign shippers, be it from Amazon Marketplace or Etsy or Shine or Temu or whatever. The other interesting thing is that this end of de minimis for the U.S., I think is actually not a U.S. phenomenon. I noticed that European importers are also calling for end of de minimis in the EU, and it's been debated in Turkey, Brazil, the UK, Chile, although Jamaica actually raised its dollar exception for de minimis, so I guess they don't have the same problem or not worried about it.
Right.
And I totally get that for an island nation that probably imports quite a bit. They would like to encourage more importing. But this is a really big deal. This is a really, really big deal. What have you been seeing on your side talking to folks who work in this space?
Like when you fly in an airplane, the pilot says, hey, it's going to be a little bit bumpy ahead, and I'd like for flight attendants to sit down. Please take your jump seats. I think that's where we are. And the reason why I say it is the changes, I agree with you, it's drastic. It's impacting 1.4 billion packages. It's going to impact billions in shipments. But most importantly, from what I can tell, some of this end of de minimis is still being challenged in court. That might work itself through, might not have worked through. In addition, not all the rules have been promulgated. So while the theory of you're just going to do formal entry, how are you going to do a formal entry at mass at, China Post? Have they thought through of currently it is if a tariff bound shipment has to be paid, the tariff has to be collected and paid, and then later on collected by the person that transports it or by the company, meaning airlines like United, American Airlines who fly cross-Atlantic, international, have to figure out how to collect all these duties and tariffs. There is this entire question, if you are a legitimate manufacturer, but you're trying to figure out, okay, how can I minimize it? Can I use FTC? So it's just, I see a lot of disruption and not knowing what status quo is still. So I think there's going to be significant disturbance, which and again, we're not economists here, but from an economist perspective, yes, it will create price increases for the reasons that you mentioned. I have to do tariffs, plus it will disrupt the supply chain because certain suppliers might pull out, or certain folks like DHL at one point in time said, I'm not doing formal entry. That's too much work for me. So I'm not servicing that market. So I think there will be a supply chain disruption. There will be some cost increases on these goods. And what I'm most interested in for me, and I don't have a clear look at that yet, is how will criminals try to exploit it? Because the disruption is always a bit never let a good crisis go to waste. And I think they will look for cracks in the system. If I was right now a counterfeiter, I would hire the smartest freight forwarder that doesn't have a job right now and say, find me all the cracks in the system that are currently being exposed by this, and how can I still get my thing in? And that person might say, absolutely, declare the SOX. You pay the tariff for SOX. Nobody cares about that. Smuggling, whatever, they never inspect it. A very good freight forwarder will know that. And so I think we'll see a lot of that, a lot of adjusting of legitimate and illegitimate supply chains. And it's going to be bumpy for all involved, for brands, for folks that produce overseas, for consumers that buy. And then for just CBP in and of itself, they have to figure out how to write all the rules, enforce the rules. And then what do you do if shipments arrive that don't follow all the rules? Do I detain them? Do I ship them back? I don't know. All of those are questions.
I think what people don't realize is that this requires an immense and enormous IT change rollout between multiple supply chain partners who have to actually start passing back and forth paperwork that never really had to before. And I was on Wall Street through Y2K, and I didn't work on Y2K code refactoring, but I actually remember watching the Herculean, almost Manhattan Project effort to rewrite and check every line of code to make sure it wasn't going to crash at midnight of 1999. And, they had a year and a half plus to prepare for that. The White House made their announcement earlier this year, and it seemed only certain just maybe a month or two ago. There has not been that much time. And so I think, and I want to get to counterfeits in a second, we're going to see a pause similar to the pandemic where supply chains took a big breather and were like, okay, we can't do this right now.
Right.
Shipping is going to drop temporarily and people are going to adjust. At the other end of this process, the system will be left with, assuming nothing else changes, it's going to be a system in which there are fewer packages shipped to minimis because of the cost issues. More people will mass freight their products into a country and then do fulfillment from within the country. So you'll send your container full of socks, and then the socks will get shipped out of a warehouse, in the port of Long Beach or near Long Beach, California. You won't send every pair of socks from China Post or Indonesian Post. So there'll be fewer packages, which is great for counterfeit detection because CBP has got a smaller haystack to look through. And in theory, there should be more paperwork. And a lot of people don't know this, but when CBP or HSI, which is sort of the investigative arm of Customs and Border Protection, the Homeland Security Investigations folks, when they are worried about smuggling, like when they've talked to me about counterfeit medicine coming into the country, they will say, we're going to go back and we're going to look at all the other shipments that came from that shipper, right? They have vast databases. They retain huge amounts of information. The more information that de minimis packages are going to be required to send through is going to make their job easier to find counterfeits. And that is going to be a net positive for consumers who maybe are put at risk by counterfeits. The obvious example that I work on every day being counterfeit medicine, but the less obvious one is the Apple charger that catches fire, either while you're on the plane or in your house, you're not paying attention and it starts a fire in your home. I think that is where we will be at the end of the day, assuming nothing else changes. But of course, tariff policy in the U.S. has been in a very dynamic environment.
Yeah, and to your point, I think the world of customs, I think the world of ICE, we work a lot with them, as you know. My biggest worry is, and I just did a double research take while we started recording, if anything had been promulgated, but no rules have been promulgated on this. So this was done by executive order, right? So there's a law that later on will take effect, and CBP might be writing rules then. But right now, there's no rules. So if you're a customs officer, you got to get some direction of what do you want for me to do with this, right? How do you want for us to do this differently? And so I'm a little bit worried what it will do as an interim strain on enforcement, what it will do on how people will just execute it, and that we don't have something like the first time the administration briefly tried de minimis, where CBP and U.S. Postal just said, okay, fine, we'll just stop shipping stuff, right? Because they're like, we can't figure it out, we just stop. That would be terrible for the U.S. and the world economy if that just happens. But the other thing is like, I think there will be cracks and counterfeiters will try to exploit in the short term. Agree with you fully. Long term, getting rid of de minimis, great thing. No need for it. Plus, the law has an exemption for it. If family members still want to ship each other things, they will put a rule in place that allows you to do that, which probably has to do with IDs and double ID checking or whatever it is. And that's all great. So I'm for the change. I would like for the change to be implemented a bit more thoughtfully and with the process that it needs, versus us kind of building the airplane while flying it.
Oh, my friend, you are in the wrong timeline for thoughtful, deliberative, and bar telegraphed national policy. I will say that if you look at like the stock prices of the companies that would be affected here, they don't seem to be reflecting a cliff fall off of shipping. And so that's an interesting thing. I think for consumers, like how I have seen this affect people who are not in anti-counterfeit policy. I have a relative in Canada who told me, because they're also having trade policy dynamic environments up there, that he actually ordered something, it arrived, the company that was doing the delivery told him that it would come with a tariff and that he would have to pay it. And he told them, I did not order that, and refused the package, which is a terrible situation to put everybody else in. Although he can be, I think he's got, an explanation that he wasn't warned of the tariff when he went to the checkout. Right. And that's the other thing. I follow illustrator who draws comics, and she's in Australia, and she just announced that she usually every month will send me a package of things like pins and stickers and comic magazines that she's drawn based upon my subscription. And she said she's probably going to have to suspend that because the tariffs would make it too expensive. I mean, I think I pay her $10 or $15 a month, and I get a pile of her art every couple of months. And I don't think she's going to be able to do that with the tariff environment now. She'll probably figure a way around it, but I just think people are going to feel these bumps along the road. And if you look at Reddit, especially the logistics subreddit, you'll see people talk about large tariff charges in checkouts right now. And it's been happening for over a month or two. Consumers are going to notice this, and it's going to be super annoying. And the problem is the answer of just go buy it in the US. Well, a lot of our materials for those ingredients come in and are being tariffed, so the price is going to go up anyway.
Yeah, it'll be hard to find some things domestically made. Like some of them are just, it's not here. And then to your point, it's interesting. I was quickly, as you were saying, the stock market always is a beautiful indicator how impactful a policy will be. And actually, when you look towards the commercial shippers, they're down a solid 10 to 20% kind of since the beginning of the year. So that's down solidly. The market is worried that something in the shipping industry will impact them. So the larger ones are down. Larger online sellers are still fine because I think folks will think, yep, they'll work it around. So we'll see. And within the transportation stocks, I see dips, which actually coincide with the executive orders. So yeah, I think the market thinks that there will be something will not be going as smoothly. So let's see where it goes.
If I had to make a prediction as we left this area, it would be that there is an enforcement deferral for 90 days.
Well, it's August 26th, so there's a couple of days, and then we can, why? I don't know. That's why it's good with date stamping these episodes, because otherwise people listen to it in like 2 weeks and they're like, what are they talking about? But there was a second story you had, right?
Okay, so Sven, I'm never going to let the fake stamp story go.
Yes.
I just noticed that there is a man in Liverpool, England, who was sentenced to 28 months in prison for selling like 650,000 British pounds worth of fake post stamps. So he got a fine and he got to go to jail. Yeah, unbelievable.
It is. Oh my goodness. This is actually my favorite right now. So yes, the story that will never die, fake stamps, they keep actually coming up on my TikTok feed as an ad. That's really what actually annoys me the most. But because I always type in cheap USPS stamps during the podcast to see where we're at. The ads are still up. So Google is still making money from counterfeiters and fake stamps. I love that. But my favorite is that the top sponsored sellers of fake stamps right now is all Sheen and Poshmark. Two of the most notorious sellers of counterfeit are the featured ones. And these stamps, they're even better. Now a roll of 100 is $9.40
Not
versus
legal.
76 or whatever it should be. So that's just fabulous. So the issue is clearly not going away. I would like to see a large-scale enforcement on it. I would really like to, and I know you and I have been trying to work certain channels, that at least we get something that makes the platforms not accept money for advertisements for these things. So yeah, I'm glad that the Brits did an enforcement, and I think we should do the same thing and start to be
Well, we could
more
take
aggressive.
lessons. That guy's spending 28 months in prison, which is sometimes as long as you spend for counterfeiting cancer drugs in the U.S. So
That's
I
crazy.
think that's probably a lesson in how we could do that.
Well, in the
I had a
U.S., the law is it's counterfeiting currency. It's under that statute. So the penalties are there. They're not being applied. Penalties are there in the U.S.
Yeah, I don't actually know of anyone arrested for fake stamps. I haven't seen that story for quite a while.
No.
In terms of other counterfeits closer to home, I did also notice that Formula One, which has made one of its regular stopovers Las Vegas, where they alter the city's geography to account for the race, the holding company is suing 2 souvenir shops in Vegas for selling counterfeit Formula One items during that first race back in 2023. And those places, it was not surprising that there's a ton of trademark violations in places like that. The souvenirs are all incredibly inexpensive. And there was a lot of cat and mouse. Apparently, the Formula One attorneys and team said that they knew one of the owners was in the shop because his car was parked there, but everyone kept saying he wasn't around. And then merchandise disappeared from shelves before they walked in the door, figuring that they knew they were coming. But my favorite about all this is that the souvenir shop that was one of the 2 that was busted is called Crazy Eli, which pretty much tracked for someplace accused of selling counterfeit products.
Yeah. But that's kind of on par. Like they do similar enforcement actions around the Super Bowl each year. The IPR Center actually makes a big deal around it and does like a real heavy counterfeit sweep around wherever the Super Bowl is. They do it once a year. And yeah, these large events attract us. It just is. And it's, I'm a huge Formula One fan, so thank you for raising that story. And one of the last races I was at, that's exactly it. You can buy the official team jersey or whatever it is, and that's like 110. Or you buy one that looks really, really similar for 20, and you're like, so it is fascinating how that still goes. All right, I want to quickly do one. Another story that I saw, which I found, again, something that all of a sudden continues to reappear. Counterfeit currency, right? We have been talking about fake $100 bills. Well, Europol said, hold my beer, because they seized a total of banknotes and coins worth over like nearly $1 million, $280,000 in euro notes, $679,000 in US dollar notes, and then $12,000 of the British pound that were being mass shipped into or through Europe to other destinations. And it's just incredible that all of a sudden counterfeit currency is popping up again. It kind of had disappeared, and especially it had disappeared like in the developed nations, but it seems to be making a big comeback.
Well, I guess money's money.
Well, not true, because somebody is counterfeit.
I noticed a story that BMW advertised and touted the fact that they're putting a new hologram strip on their packaging, which also allows digital authentication. And me, I'm a little bit of a doubting Thomas on package security. I think it's a part of the puzzle for solving and dealing with your counterfeiting problem. But a lot of packaging folks describe it as a panacea, which I don't think it is. But I suppose it will help. I, however, would point out that during COVID, I found fake holograms on N95 masks seized by FDA and CBP. And so I'm a little bit of a doubting Thomas. I guess that's why they have a digital authenticator as well on it. It's just part, I think that a big part of this may be, and I said this to somebody else yesterday when they were pitching me on their packaging security solution. The audience for these is not just consumers or car mechanics, it's also going to be customs officials, right? Customs officials, if you train them, will be like, that hologram doesn't look like the hologram that BMW taught us is what it should look like. And that actually is how they got the fake N95 mask hologram, is because it did not look like the real hologram that was on a 3M mask. And so they were able to stop it. And that is one of the big values, I think, of package security in our modern day and age, is that customs officials actually can use it to seize or destroy or refuse entry to products that are clearly trademark counterfeits.
Agreed. Whenever a client asks us, hey, I have this feature or the system I want to introduce, what do you think about it? My first question back will be, what's your objective, right? What are you trying to get done? Because it can be a very valuable tool. So for example, for this, if you tie it to the part inside, and if this is just so your actual legitimate dealers, when they get a shipment, can quickly verify that, yep, that's an original part that I ordered from BMW. It's not like somebody emptied the container in between and put some crap back in. No, I still have the legitimate part. If you're doing something between willing partners that want to scan and verify this, yeah, it can be a fantastic tool, can be a cheap tool, can be a wonderful thing. If you think that this is something that will kill counterfeits, no, it doesn't, because it can be replicated, stolen, ripped open, reused, all kinds of different things. So what's the objective, right? And there's also a lot of folks out there that try to sell these things as the panacea or silver bullet for everything, and they're just not always that. Because the 3M mask, as an example, with the holograms during the pandemic, 3M doesn't use holograms on their masks. So the counterfeiters actually added fake holograms to make it seem real. And 3M was like, yeah, we don't put that on our products.
Well, Mercedes-Benz is working in this area too. And you and I are both familiar with, and I got to give them credit here, the A2C2 coalition of automakers and parts makers does a lot of great work. The examples they tend to use are airbags, right? Counterfeit airbags, which is a life-threatening problem. But I think that this is a really exciting space. I think it's good work that actually protects the safety of the public, and I appreciate what A2C2 has done to keep me safe from counterfeit parts for my cars.
The funny thing actually, so I owned a Mercedes at one point in time, and on Facebook you can join owners groups of those kind of cars, and I hopped on because that could be fun to talk about the same car we have. Within 2 seconds, you get all this oh, I'm selling rims and they look like new. And you look and you're like, I know that these rims, they should be $4,000 or $5,000, but they're $500. They can't be right. And if you ever don't want to see something horrible, Google what a rim does that's counterfeit at high speeds. It literally completely disintegrates, and you don't want that to happen. So yes, love what Mercedes is doing. They run a very, very nice comprehensive program, and the counterfeit amongst their stuff is unfortunately still pretty rampant, especially in the aftermarket. Yeah, agreed.
Are we still dealing with fake Labubu dolls, Ben?
You just want for me to say it, isn't it? Just admit it. Okay, fine. Yes, they're still fake Labubu dolls, and they are literally at this point apparently kind of everywhere. The Consumer Product Safety Commission even issued a warning about these dolls, saying that they're out there, that consumers should be aware. While obviously not a life-saving device, the warning did say that they have received reports of the fake ones breaking apart easily and releasing small parts, so can become a choking hazard. But yes, Labubu is la fake. So be careful when you buy them. I still don't know what they are, but yes.
And for the final story I think we'll do for this episode, because we're getting a little long in the tooth, Seagate, which is a very, very old, reliable, well-known hard drive maker, conducted a raid in Malaysia alongside local law enforcement. And we did cover fake computer parts when we talked about the NVIDIA chips, the big graphics cards.
Yeah.
They actually found a gang that was buying old hard drives, resetting the odometer, which records how many hours of use the drive has had, and then selling them as new, but at a aggressively cheap price that should have warned any consumer. And at this point, I would say if you've got a refurbished old drive sold as new, you probably got lucky, because I see a lot of pictures online of people who said, I bought a hard drive and what I got was a bag of sand. But props to Seagate and props to the Malaysian law enforcement for partnering with them and busting this gang. You cannot do this work without local support. And I will agree that it's not as sexy in law enforcement to do busts of counterfeit products versus drugs or guns or other more obvious public safety issues. But it's also important, and it's also a part of ways in which criminals victimize you and me. And so I was glad to see it.
Yeah, no, I for my computer, it's the same. I'm always so nervous when you all of a sudden see like, oh, this monitor is really cheap. And you're like, is it really cheap because it's a secondary of a genuine, or is it exactly what you just described? It is a tricky space. It makes a lot of money. And you're right. It's super easy to take, and not super easy, but I just make the chip look like brand new, right? Wash it off, put new spray paint on. Very, very hard to do unless you run H100 through a test. So, well, this was a nice, good episode. Thank you. Good seeing you. Shakir, read us out.
All right. And before I do that, everybody make sure that you, wherever you're watching us on or listening to us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or Podbean, that you like and follow. All right. Roll the credits. The Imitation Nation podcast is a production of Cause Stories and is the sole owner. Podcast production by Anna Rowland, management by Sarah Ember Safdar, and theme music written by Jonathan Boyle.